I'm going to show you all the comically large cannons on planes in War Thunder. The criteria for my list was the cannons have to have a diameter over 40mm. Which planes have the heaviest shell and which has the highest burst mass? Keep watching to find out. I'm also going to be showing you throughout the video the first person view when firing the main guns, because I want you to see the airspeed indicator in the top left. Look how much kick these guns have on an aeroplane with full engine power. Starting with Germany, which has the most heavy gun planes. The HS29, also known fondly as the Duck. It has a 75mm gun that fires armor-piercing high explosive shells weighing 6.8 kilograms that can punch through 137mm of steel. It has a normal fire rate and almost doesn't overheat. One great feature that stands out to me is the absolutely gigantic muzzle brake, the absolute unit of it. From my personal view though, flying this in ground RB is not quite ideal. I do find the engines a tad underpowered. Next, the ME410 with a 50mm gun that fires armor-piercing shells that weigh 2 kilograms and can punch through 106mm of steel. The fire rate is rather normal, but it overheats in around 6 rounds. Even though the gun is less powerful than the Ducks, I have a biased love for this plane in Tank RB as I find it's rather effective. Next, we have the ME262, also fondly known as the Narwhal. This has a 50mm gun, which can fire armor-piercing tracer rounds that weigh 2 kilograms and can punch through 106mm of steel. This gun, unlike the other two guns, is rapid fire, and it will overheat in around 6 rounds. I'm also a big fan of this in Tank RB, as it can be used for ground pounding, but if you're lucky, you can try and get the drop on an enemy fighter and give him a good surprise. Moving on to Italy, the P108, which has a 102mm gun. This fires armor-piercing tracer rounds that weigh 15 kilograms. They can punch through 159mm of steel. The cannon fire rate is rather slow and it doesn't overheat. I'm pretty sure this plane fires the heaviest shell of any plane in War Thunder. Also, unlike the other planes which had auto-loaders, this plane is manually loaded. I also want to draw your eyes to the gun at the front and notice that it's pointed slightly downwards. This is so that you don't have to point the entire plane directly at the target you're trying to strike. You can keep the plane flying a bit more level and don't have to pitch the plane all the way down. It is a bit weird when it comes to aiming though. As you're trying to strafe a target, you sort of have to walk the plane onto target instead of what you normally do, which is point the plane directly at the target and then start aiming. Onwards to America with the PBJ-1H, which has a 75mm gun. This fires armor-piercing tracer rounds that weigh 6.8 kilograms and can punch through 104mm of steel. The gun is slow and doesn't overheat. It's also manually loaded too. Because this is an American vehicle, it's also got 8 50 cal strapped to the front, because apparently a 75mm cannon wasn't enough DACA. Moving on, we have the XA-38 with a 75mm gun. This fires armor-piercing tracer shells that weigh 6.2 kilograms and can punch through 104mm of steel. The fire rate is slow, but at least it doesn't overheat. We only now have 2 50 cals in the nose, but I do really like the nose design. It looks very sleek, very aerodynamic, and perhaps even demure. Also, I want to point out the remote control turret system on this plane, which I find absolutely fascinating, with one turret on top and one turret underneath. Onwards to the land of the rising sun, with Japan next, and the KI-109 with its 75mm gun. This can fire armor-piercing tracer rounds that weigh 6.2 kilograms that can punch through 83mm of steel. The fire rate is slow and it also has no overheating. This plane also has a manually loaded cannon, with, amusingly to me at least, the cannon breech sitting directly between the two pilots. Next, the KI-102 with a 57mm cannon. It fires high explosive shells that weigh 1.5 kilograms and have 250 grams of HE. It has a rather fast rate of fire and almost doesn't overheat. Next we have Great Britain, and we start with the Mosquito with the 57mm gun. It can fire armor-piercing tracer rounds that weigh 2.9 kilograms and can punch through 117mm of steel. It has a normal fire rate, but it kind of overheats in around 6 rounds. It's great for ground pounding, but sadly lacks HE filler in the shells. I've also been lucky to be able to see the gun mechanism in real life. In RAF Cosford, they have a Mosquito with the 57mm gun setup sitting underneath it. Next we have the Tempest Mark V with two 47mm cannons. The guns fire armor-piercing tracer shells that weigh 2.1 kilograms and can punch through 99mm of steel. The fire rate is good, and the guns are difficult to overheat. We haven't really had any vehicles with gun pod configuration so far, so this is already quite unusual, but also having such large guns strapped to a fighter chassis is rather amusing. What's also pretty damn funny is the amount of recoil these guns make, and you can see the plane is fighting for its life with each shot going forwards. When I was experimenting with the planes for this video, I managed to overheat one of the guns and ended up with asymmetric gun thrust. This is not something you have to deal with normally in War Thunder. Look at the absolute recoil, the poor plane is fighting for its life with that asymmetric reverse thrust. Moving on to the Soviets, and we'll start with the Su-8 and its four 45mm cannons. These can fire armor-piercing high explosive that weigh 1.1 kilograms and can pierce through 59mm of steel. These are rapid-fire cannons, and they overheat pretty quickly in around 6 rounds. This plane also has the highest burst mass in this video, 20.86 kilograms per second. That is a stupendously large number of kilograms per second being shot forward. Moving on to the Yak-9K, which has a 45mm cannon. This can fire armor-piercing high explosive rounds that weigh 1.1 kilograms and can punch through 59mm of steel. The gun is rapid fire and it will overheat in around 6 to 8 rounds. It's a very light airframe and can be used for dogfighting, unlike most planes in this video. And even the armor-piercing HE round will obliterate most planes if you get a single hit in. It is still boggling my mind that they've stuffed a 45mm cannon barrel through the middle of an engine. Lastly, we move on to Sweden and the T-18B, equipped with a 57mm cannon. This can fire armor-piercing tracer shells that weigh 2.5 kilograms and can punch through 75mm of steel. The gun is rapid fire, but it doesn't really overheat. It also has the second highest burst mass in this video, at 11.9 kilograms. I don't have much to say on this vehicle, but I do want to point out how the cockpit is asymmetrically set to one side of this plane. If I did miss any planes, please feel free to tell me in the comments down below. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one.